Good morning.
Good morning.
Today is Sunday, February 22nd, 2026. We'll start with a story. True story. It was about 10 years ago. I was doing some training at a Zen monastery in Japan. Several of us from this center has spent a longer or shorter period of time there. At this center, and maybe it's true of Zen in general, but some of the practices there were vigorous, quite vigorous, speedy. If you think the meals here go quickly, the meals there go quite quickly, and you're eating with chopsticks. Kinhin, it's nearly a run. And chanting, I hear you laughing, you know, fast and loud. Chanting's done first thing in the morning. For those who need a cup of coffee, you probably don't after doing fast and loud chanting like that. So in the chanting hall, or in the chanting and teisho was done in a different place than the zendo, but they sat very much how we are now, with 2 rows facing a center line, and they sat on the floor, mats on the floor, and the teacher, the roshi there, would sit in the middle. And whenever this very fast, very loud chanting would fall apart, he would slam his hand on the floor, which would stop this chanting, and he'd say something. He's Japanese, so he was speaking in Japanese. And whatever it was would get fixed, and we'd start again. On this particular day, that's what happened. We're doing fast, loud, vigorous chanting. He slams his hand on the floor, and the chanting stops. This time, he gets up, walks over to the mokugyo player. So the mokugyo is the fish drum. It was what kept us in beat with each other. That's how we were able to stay together. Just thump, 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 thump. And we follow the beat of the mokugyo. So he gets up, walks over to the mokugyo player, takes the striker out of his hand, turns the striker around so that the head, the soft part that strikes the instrument, is facing this young man, and he pokes him in the belly with it, says, "Hara! Hara!" and then says all this other stuff in Japanese. At this monastery, the languages spoken are English and Japanese. So anything that's said to the group or in front of the group in one language is translated into the other. And in this case, what his words were translated. He essentially, the gist of what he said was, "Wake up. Pay attention. You can do better than this. Find your center." So what he said was both admonishment and encouragement, filled with compassion. That, by the way, this same young man had played the taiko drum, the standing drum. There's one out in the foyer. And was having the same issue, speeding up and slowing down. All over the place. On the Mokugyo, we couldn't follow him. And the Roshi sitting there in the middle can hear the two sides were out of sync with each other. But what I want to talk about today are those first two words that he said to that young man. Hara, hara. Or in our English pronunciation, hara. Even with my very limited English, I understood what he said. Hara, for those of you who are in the workshop, and we've all been to a workshop at least once, I'm sure it got mentioned. And I want to say a little bit more about that. Hara means belly. That's what the literal meaning of it is. And it's the belly band around the body. So between like the pelvis and the ribs. All the way through. All the way around. And the tanden is the bullseye of Hara. It's about, 2-3 fingers width below the navel. It's the center of the body, both horizontally and vertically. But it's much more than a physical location. It's considered to be a wellspring of vital energy. The very source of life, of stability, steadiness, groundedness. Ever renewing source of energy. The terms hara and tanden are often used synonymously. So even though you may be hearing the word hara, what is really meant is tanden. So that's how I'll be using it today. And the source that I'll be reading from, that's what I heard in Japan. I never heard the word tanden. What I heard was hara, but tanden was meant. It's not the other way around where you hear the word tanden and what is really meant was hara. That you probably won't hear that. You'll often hear the word hara when tanden is intended. Hara and zazen, or again, tanden, is the focal point of our concentration. Different meditation traditions use different focal points. Some traditions use, say, the forehead, or in between the eyes. Others might use the upper lip, or that space there between the nose and the upper lip. Still others might use the heart as a focal point for your practice. In Zen, we focus our attention. We do our practice from the Hara. And off the mat, Hara is an anchor for the mind. It's kind of like the anchor for a boat, where when a boat drops anchor and that anchor settles onto and digs into the ground below, it keeps the boat steady, keeps it from floating away with whatever wind or current will blow it. Hara does the same for us. Keeps us grounded, steady. Prevents us from being swept away from circumstances, inner conditions, distraction. Zen practitioners are taught to keep the mind anchored at all times in the Hara and allow all of our activities to radiate from that point. In the Three Pillars of Zen and the editor's introduction, Roshi Kapleau speaks about the relationship between Zazen and Hara. And this is what he says. By realigning the physical, mental, and psychic energies through proper breathing, concentration, and sitting, Zazen establishes a new body-mind equilibrium with its center of gravity in the vital Hara. So when he says psychic here, I want to be clear that he doesn't mean supernatural powers. He's speaking of body-mind energies that can't be pinned down as being body or mind. Zazen establishes a new body-mind equilibrium with its center of gravity in the vital Hara. So when we sit in Zazen, over time, body and mind are reunified and centered down below. So instead of being centered in our thinking mind up high, we find our center of gravity in the pit of our bellies. And centering in the Hara is no small thing. It is a reorientation of our entire lives. Harada Roshi, he was my great-great-grandfather in the Dharma, so he was Roshi Kapleau's teacher's teacher. So he's, for those who have chanted our ancestral line, he's Daien Sogaku, honored one, then Hakuen Yoko, honored one, Zen Tetsu Kapleau, honored one. So he's Daien Sogaku. So he said that very thing, the center of the universe is in the pit of your belly. That's how dramatic that reorientation can be. Hara is much more strongly emphasized in Japan than it is here in the United States. And not just in Zen. It's emphasized in wrestling, painting, archery, the martial arts, tea ceremony, flower arranging, dancing, and on and on and on. It's in the culture, embedded in the culture. And it's not just in the culture of Japan, but it's also in China, Korea, India, among others. Just those four: Japan, China, Korea, India, make up more than a third of the world's population. So more than a third of the world's population has Hara as a part of their culture. So isn't it worth us giving it some attention too? So that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to be reading from a book, Hara, The Vital Center of Man, by Carlfried Graf Durkheim. This is translated from the German. And I'll be reading from a chapter, and I won't be reading the entire chapter. There's a lot in here. It's a wonderful book. It's called Hara as the Purpose of Practice. And I'll apologize now because this book was written in 1956, and there's a lot of male-oriented language. And some people are really sensitive about that. And because there's just so much of it, I'm not going to try to twist myself in knots to try to make it more gender neutral. So I hope that the subject matter is important enough to where you can look beyond this language. All right, so he starts. Hara, it is true, is part of man's original endowment, but for that very reason poses a task for him. For it is the task of man to become what he is. Man can fulfill his task of becoming a complete human being only if he overcomes again and again that within him which obstructs the way to his true becoming. And also if, at the same time, he apprehends and allows to grow within him that basic power which is always striving to carry him on to his fully human state. Becoming a complete human being. I think for many of us, we come to practice without a body. We're a floating head. That's how I came. I didn't even know I had a body. So becoming a complete human being. Letting go of what gets in the way of becoming a complete and whole human being and growing what lets us become a complete and whole human being. He says also that Hara is a part of man's original endowment. And we can see that. We can see it in young children. They breathe with Hara, walk with Hara, sit, move from the center of their being, this low center of gravity. They're grounded. You can also see the same in a sleeping person of an older age, an adult even. When they've dropped whatever it is that we're holding on to, all holding in the body, all self-consciousness. We breathe with Hara. Look at your significant other while they're asleep. Where's the breath coming from? Look at them when they're awake. Where's the breath coming from? Is it their belly moving? Their chest? Their shoulders? As we grow up, for whatever reasons, maybe it's our education, whatever it is, we become centered in the head, lost in thought, divided, self-conscious. So instead of living from our center, how we were born, we become top-heavy and easily lose our balance. There's a lamp in my quarters in the dorm that's top-heavy. It's like I'll go to turn it on or turn it off, and I have to be careful because it's like if I just look at it, it will tumble over and fall on the floor. Fortunately, it's a pretty sturdy lamp. We become like that lamp, easily lose our balance, easily upset. Zen practice reorients us, grounds us with Hara as our anchor. In Zen, body and mind are not two. That's why so much time was spent on posture. Whatever is going on in the body will be reflected in the mind. Whatever's going on in the mind is going to be reflected in the body. So posture is important. We emphasize it in workshops, even in the daily training at the center. When I was doing quite a bit of training here, Bodhin Roshi would stress our posture. Sitting, standing, walking in an upright, balanced, independent way. Not leaning against the wall, not standing there with most of your legs, the weight of of your body on one leg, standing with your arms crossed or sitting with your arms crossed, being slumped. There was once I was cleaning the kitchen storeroom, cleaning the shelves. I was taking all the dry goods off of the shelves, cleaning the shelf, and putting the things back and reorganizing things. And I'm trying to figure out what my game plan on this is going to be. So I'm standing there, I'm looking at it, and I've got my hands on my hips, and I'm thinking about this. How am I going to do this in a way that I'm not going to be stepping over those things? And I see in the corner of my eye, Roshi coming down the stairs and walking slowly by the kitchen storeroom. When I see him, I drop my hands. Then he peeks in. He peeks into the storeroom. He looks me up and down, nods, and walks off. It's good training. It really is. I know I used to think, why is he so particular? And what is he doing down here anyway? So fussy. Why all the... But it's good training. It really is. It makes a difference in the balance of mind. Body and mind are not two. It's another way of training the mind by training the body. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha said this: greater in battle than the man who would conquer 1,000,000 men is he who would conquer just one, himself. When the body is centered, balanced, the mind naturally settles. And when the mind settles, it's easier for the body to relax and let go. It's a feedback loop, a virtuous cycle. Now, our author here speaks about the alternative to this virtuous cycle. So this is what he says. However well performed an action may be, however well controlled a technique, as long as the man using it is subject to moods and atmosphere, unrelaxed and easily disturbed, for example, when he is being watched, then he is a master only in a very limited degree. He is a master only of technique and not of himself. He controls the skill he has, but not what he is in himself. And if a man can do more than he is, his skill often fails him in critical moments. Real control over oneself can only be achieved by a special training, the outcome of which is not just technical skill, but an established frame of mind, which ensures the required result. This is practice understood as exercise. Its purpose is not an outer visible result, but an inner achievement. In practice of this kind, the person developing, not the deed or the visible work as such, is what matters. The person developing is what matters. And then he tells this long story about an archery lesson. Now, I won't read the whole story because it's too long. It's got a lot of detail. So I'll summarize it in some parts. So he had a lesson with his archery instructor. His instructor gives him some homework. So for weeks, he'd been practicing on his own and was looking forward to showing his teacher, master archer, how he'd been doing, that he'd done his homework. So before the lesson, he and his teacher had a cup of tea, caught up with each other, and then they went out into the garden where the author here saw the target for the first time. And this is where we'll pick up. So this is what he says. This target brought me the first surprise of many that awaited me. It was a bundle of straw about 3 feet across, placed at eye level on a wooden stand. So about 3 feet across, eye level on a wooden stand. So our mats that you're sitting on, they're about 3 feet across. You take a few of those and turn them into a cube, and now you've got this bale of straw. He says, my feelings may be imagined when I was told that a pupil had to practice 2 or 3 years before this target, and what is more, at a distance of about 3 yards. To aim for 3 years at a wide straw bundle from a distance of 3 yards. So 3 yards, not about 9 feet, is less than the distance than it is from this seat to the altar. Aiming using a bow and arrow at a distance from this seat to the altar. You're going to hit the target. It would be really hard not to. If you just point it in that direction, you're going to hit it. So hitting the target isn't the issue. That isn't the lesson. That isn't the point. So what is? So he continues. Oh, yes. Lots of reading in between. So he starts describing. He describes this series of motions that precedes the shooting of an arrow. So bowing to his teacher, taking the proper posture, placing the arrow on the bow, raising the whole works to aim at the target. And this is where he comes in again. Before I have even reached the point where the arrow must touch the ear and cheek, and the whole bow is stretched to its fullest capacity, the deep voice of the master cuts right through me. Stop! Surprised and a little irritated because of this interruption at the moment of utmost concentration, I lower the bow. The master takes it from my hands, winds the string around once at the end of the bow, and hands it back to me, smiling. Once again, please. Unsuspecting, I begin again to go through the same series of motions. But when it comes to drawing the bow, my strength fails me. The bow has now twice the tension it had before, and my strength is insufficient. My arms begin to tremble. I sway unsteadily to and fro. The posture so painstakingly won is lost. The master, however, begins to laugh. Desperately, I try again, but it is hopeless. Nothing but a pitiful failure. I must have looked rather vexed, for the master asks, "What are you so annoyed about?" What? You can ask me that? For weeks and weeks I have practiced, and now, at the vital moment, you interrupt me before I have even drawn. Once again, the master laughs cheerfully. Then suddenly serious, he says something like this. What exactly do you want? That you had accomplished the task I had given you, I could see from the way you took up your bow. But the point is this. When a man, perhaps after a long struggle, has achieved a certain form in himself, in his life, in his work, only one misfortune can then befall him, that fate should allow him to stand still in that achievement. If fate means well by him, it knocks his success out of his hands before it sets and hardens. To do just this during practice is the task of the good teacher. For what is the point of all this? Not the hitting of the target. For what ultimately matters in learning archery or any other art is not what comes out of it, but what goes into it. That is, into the person. The self-practice in the surface of an outward accomplishment serves, beyond it, the development of the inner man. And what endangers this inner development more than anything else? Standing still in his achievement. When we begin practicing, we learn what to do with the body, what to do with the breath, what to do with the mind, how to be present in our everyday lives. Each time we return to what is, whether we're doing Zazen or doing something else in our lives, we are training the whole person to be right here, right now. We're always training, whether we're conscious or not. We could be training ourselves to be distracted or training ourselves to be present. As our practice matures, we begin to see some of these benefits of Zen practice. Greater concentration, greater stability, steadiness of mind. These are side effects. And what can interrupt this steady development in our practice, this growing deeper, is clinging to those experiences, clinging to peace of mind, clinging to serenity, expecting each of our sittings to be just as great as the last one. As soon as we think we've got it, this is it, I'm there, we stagnate. Often we have to go through that over and over again and watch whether all of these so-called gains slip away before we stop doing that, because it's kind of painful. And this shifts our emphasis on practice, not to get something out of it, but to put our whole selves into it. In the Prajna Paramita that we chanted before Teisho, we said, holding to nothing whatever. Whatever it is that we're holding on to, when we let that go, accord with what is, it brings us in greater and greater harmony with our true nature, our true selves. Roshi Kapleau said this: with body and mind consolidated, focused, and energized, the emotions respond with increased sensitivity and purity, and volition exerts itself with greater strength of purpose. No longer are we dominated by intellect at the expense of feeling, nor driven by the emotions unchecked by reason or will. Eventually, Zazen leads to a transformation of personality and character. Dryness and rigidity and self-centeredness give way to flowing warmth, resiliency, and compassion, while self-indulgence and fear are transmuted into self-mastery and courage. Since Hara can be such an immense support in our practice, how do we go about reestablishing this anchor? Roshi Kapleau's teacher, Yasutani Roshi, said this: put your mind in the bottom of your belly. There's a blind Buddha there. Make him see. So put your mind in the bottom of your belly. You can do that right now. During Zazen, we gather our limbs together towards the center of our body as much as possible. We sit on our sitting bones, which allows for this pelvic tilt, thrusting the tanden forward, highlighting it. Our hands resting in our laps, right there where the tanden is, drawing our minds to it. Take a deep breath. As Yasutani Roshi says in his Zazen instructions, and let it go. Exhale slowly and quietly. The breathing in Zen is quiet. And completely, until all the air is out. Just gently, even squeezing just gently, just below the navel, until all of the air is out. And allow the inhale to come naturally. And then do it again. Exhaling completely. When you get to the bottom of the exhale, squeezing gently, allowing the rest of the air to come out. And inhaling naturally. Doing that 2 or 3 or 10 times. And then letting go of all intentionality with breathing. This anchoring in the Hara, which is what we've just done, relaxes all of the tensions in the upper body. Allows the thoughts to just drain away. There's nothing, no tension there to sustain them. Allows us to be more concentrated, more one-pointed. It's as if from the belly button up, there's nothing. Our eyes, ears, nose, mouth, brain is located right there in the tanden. That blind Buddha in the bottom of our belly can now see. Over time, no matter what we're doing, what's happening in us or around us, we stay anchored in Hara. In the time that we have left, I want to make sure I say and emphasize that Hara isn't awakening. It can help cultivate awareness, compassion, help us ground us in our practice. But it isn't enlightenment. Hara can even be misused. With this stability of mind, one can use Hara to become a skilled thief, a master manipulator, an efficient killer. So despite the title of this chapter being Hara as the purpose of practice, Hara is not the purpose of Zen practice. Far from it. It's not our goal. It's a useful tool, but it's not the goal of practice. Awakening to our true nature and functioning out of that nature goes far beyond Hara. So please don't let all of this talk about Hara distract you from your practice. I'll quote some final words. This is from Roshi Kapleau. He said this: the ultimate aim of Zen training is full awakening, not serenity or high energy states, which are only byproducts of Zazen. All right. That's all we have. We'll stop now and recite the 4 vows.